The biggest lie I've been told wasn't from my parents when they said that babies came from cranes, but actually from the movie Mean Girls, when it portrayed a toxic friend as a singular stereotype. Now, if you haven't watched the movie Mean Girls, firstly, are you living under a rock? But secondly, the movie follows transfer student Gretchen as she navigates the weird social norms of high school, but ultimately ends up falling in a toxic, mean girl clique. In order to avoid the same pitfalls Gretchen did as she battled toxic blonde girls, I tried to make friends with people that were as far from the stereotype that this movie created as possible. But despite this, I still faced regret, manipulation, betrayal, because in reality, and unlike in the movies, there's a very thin line between a good and bad friend. The one truth the movie did leave me with, and what I want to talk about today, is that while it does take courage to form friendships, it takes even more to step back and move on from them. No one wants to believe that their kindergarten ride or die would ever break their friendship pact, but it's important to understand that friendships can become toxic, and when they do, it's even more important to know how to handle them, not only to strengthen pre-existing friendships, but to set up good boundaries for new ones. So firstly, I want to talk about what the movie Mean Girls defines as toxic. The antagonist we're taught to hate is Regina George. She's self-centered, manipulative towards her two closest friends, and flat out rude to anyone who doesn't benefit her in some sort of way. And not only this, but from the beginning of the movie, we're told that Regina George and her group of friends are mean, hence the title Mean Girls, and therefore obviously toxic. Unfortunately, in real life, and unlike in the movies, not only do you not have a narrator telling you about every single social group and which ones to avoid, but you can't always tell people's true intentions. I found in my own experiences in middle school, people were often taking my actions for granted, as my friends not only flat out just let me do whatever I wanted, but they also treated me like a clown instead of an actual person, highlighting that I was in a toxic friend group. Some of you may be turning to your friends and wondering, are they really who they claim to be? What now? Well, the answer may seem pretty obvious, simply exit the friendship. But it's as obvious as dodging a punch. It may seem simple to avoid a left hook, but actually moving out of the way of a fist going 25 miles per hour is pretty hard, speaking from experience. So, what do you do in these situations? For students, cutting off friends can seem pretty daunting because it runs the risk of starting bad blood between peers you have to see every single day, or puts pressure on you to create new friends. For example, Gretchen, the whole reason she didn't leave Regina George and her toxic band of friends is because she didn't want to go back to being that loner with no friends. For adults, these issues of social perception may seem pretty silly, but it's similar to in an office space. If you have a coworker that's overstepping your boundaries, it may seem more logical to simply ignore it. In these situations with toxic dynamics, the best way to deal with this is through initiating a conversation. And I know I just said confronting someone can be pretty hard for students and adults, but hear me out. Not everyone may knowingly act with bad intent. A study published by Science Daily notes that students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds often exhibit self-centered behaviors, not because they truly are, but because they're in environments that don't truly provide for them. Thus, telling a friend about their issues such as acting self-centered, rooted in being raised in an environment where they literally had to be, can inspire change over conflict and can be a good method for those who prioritize preserving friendships over ending them. So, in these situations, what should you do? I think you should actually start a conversation with those who you truly care about so you can prioritize saving your friends. But if you're still afraid of conflict and the issues that confrontation provides, there's still a good method for you. You can always opt for slowly leaving those friends, which is something that I did. In my own friendships, I opted to avoid gossip with them. I moved to a new lunch table, which I assume for adults is like moving to a new desk away from that pesky coworker. And I ultimately found myself a new group of friends. But even if cutting off those friends has those unintended consequences, why should you still take that risk? According to PubMed Central, victims of relational aggression, a form of toxic friendship involving social manipulation, experience higher levels of suicidal ideation and are even more likely to commit suicide in comparison to non-victims. You are the one getting yourself throughout the day, from tying your shoes, doing your makeup, putting on your clothes, and literally keeping yourself alive. The detriment that toxic friends pose not only to your mental but physical health as well simply isn't worth it. In these situations, you should always be putting yourself first because you are the one you have to live with. So, What should you actually look for within these friendships? When I had a clean slate, I was able to use my past experiences with toxicity in order to learn and grow from what I should never settle for in friendships. I use these experiences to outline what I'm looking for within friends. People who are good conversationalists, but also good listeners. Those who I can disagree with, but move on and agree to disagree. And people I can laugh with, but also have meaningful conversations. So at the end of the day, just like Gretchen, I was able to find a group of friends that truly liked me for who I was. But spoiler alert, unlike in the movies, my toxic friends didn't get run over by a bus like Regina George did. Friendship is an enriching experience that should serve to build you up, not tear you down. And when it does, it's important to take a step back through analyzing signs of toxicity, confronting those, and overcoming the fear of confrontation, and lastly, meeting new people. I hope these few minutes were able to condense a lesson that took me, a toxic friend group, and a 2-hour movie to learn. The courage to speak up against toxicity. And hey, I may have lost a few friends, but in the end, I found my own ride or dies that will stay for the ride and not make me want to die.